Alright, so what we're building here is a what I consider the ultimate berry base. This is a 16 to 20 planter, one-story berry hemp farm. It has room for plenty of mixing tables, pumps, batteries, and can be easily expanded. So here we're doing the basic layout. It's a 3x5. And then the TC goes there on the back side, which we just created the footprint for. And I'm just laying out the footprint here. And for the base itself, or for the farm itself. That extra triangle there is not necessary. I will be removing it shortly. As you see, I built a little too close to my other one, so I was unable to lay the TC at the moment. I will be going over and destroying the TC in the other building so I can place it in here. But I'm showing different ways to do to place a TC here and to secure it, etc. Some common items that are used, protecting TCs. And on the other one that I did in the video you saw, I had it behind, just basically behind the G door. Here I'm going to put it behind a frame and a window. And we'll end up putting a high qual window, in its place. And so, the TC will be pretty well protected. The additional triangles around it are honeycomb and can be used however you like. One of them on the right will be used as a jump up, as you'll see momentarily. And the one on the left I use as another window room that I put the battery in. So, just giving you a few different options. If you haven't seen my video just before this one, it is it's basically a walkthrough of this exact same berry farm before I built it. Showing how it's built. So again, we laid 3x5, then we did a row of triangles down the side, which is going to create the airlock, the entryway, and then the 4 squares attached to those creates a workroom. So here we're putting 3 doorways down. One will be the airlock. The other 2 either go into the workroom or the planter box room. We put roof panels here on the side. The upkeep on this base is right around 3,000, 3,200. Metal a day being done all in metal, and I'll be showing that the TC and the upkeep several times throughout the video. There's a lot of different ways to build, berry bases. There's a lot of different ways to, lay them out, whatnot. This is a very economical berry base. It's also, very high yielding. This just one floor of this berry base will hold 16 to 20 planters. The 16 are the primary ones I put in here, but the center floor you could easily have 4 more put down, and to make it 20, and you can do that for just the one floor. If you have need, you can do a second or third floor. So just to continually lay this out. That's a jump up to the roof, whether you need to do work or add, like I said, if you want to add the second floor, add a third floor, you can continually go up from there. So right now we're just laying out all the walls here, the doorways, and then we're going to lay the areas for the planter boxes. Obviously these are the roof panels. I'm just closing it in. I build with a lot of triangles. Triangles are low upkeep instead of squares. So that's why you'll see a lot of my buildings, whether it be this berry base. Yeah, the main area is squares, but corner boxes are square console. We don't have the triangle ones at this time. But here you see I put the half wall down and then I run flooring all the way across. I do this on both sides. This creates 2 levels in one floor. So I'll be able to put 8 planter boxes on each side. Obviously combining 8 and 8, 16, so you'll have 16 planter boxes. And then like I said, if you want, you can drop 4 more in the center. Everything that's already installed, should cover all that, the sprinklers, the lighting, whatnot. Here I'm just upgrading everything to metal so we can show a true upkeep on this farm. In the TC. In the first video, I had some twig left on the, just because I was building it on Builder's Paradise. Again, this was built on Rust console, so all this is proven, all this works. We don't have any issues here. With the crossover from PC to console is a lot of people see in the videos and then try on consoles because they were made on a PC server. So we don't have that issue here. This was done strictly on console. In the previous video and then the other berry base that I already built next to us. I show the sprinklers and how 4 sprinklers are watering 16 planter boxes, even though they're on top of each other, not necessarily next to each other. Using low power, 36 power is all this berry/hemp farm uses, and that includes all the lights. 8 lights, 4 sprinklers. I use a large battery, 5 E-branches, and a windmill. Now, one of the items in my other video is I put a splitter, power splitter, in, and I didn't do that in this video. Basically, just forgot about it. But I typically always put a splitter in place so I can always add power to a battery. This doesn't necessarily have to be a large battery and a windmill. It can be 3 or 4 solar panels and a medium battery, being it's only 36 power. But with the large battery and the windmill, I can add a second floor. I can add some turrets. I could add a SAM site and a couple of turrets. To this, with helicopters now are a thing in the console. Having SAM sites is a real thing. If you're not positive about the SAM sites, they're sold only at Outpost, and they're 500 scrap. Here we go. I'm putting the honeycomb in place, and then I'm going to use that as a battery room. That's the. I've got the frame and whatnot for the TC to go in there. And then I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put a battery. Like I said, you don't have to use that as a battery room. You can use it just, as additional, honeycomb. In this video, on this build, I decided to put the battery and the E-branches all in there, and it'll create, a little bit more room, around. I'm gonna let the video play here and fill in some blanks as they pop up. Apologize for the nighttime build going on here. It does. There we go. I turned my flashlight on, and I'm gonna let you watch the video a little bit. Again, if you guys enjoy the video, enjoy the base layout, design, whatnot, please hit that subscribe, like button, hit that bell for any future updates, and let's watch the rest of the layout. Oh yeah, I gotta go over here and destroy this TC here. Like I said, this is the same layout. same design over here, but the TC was overlapping. And for me to get the proper upkeep from the other base, I needed to destroy this one. So I decided to throw a Molotov on it. And that's showing you the center planter boxes. You know, I did place those in there late or after the last video, just to show that it does get water along with the other 8 planter boxes. Plenty of light. Burn, baby, burn. In here, I'm trying to put the TC where the jump up is instead of one slot over where the door frame is, and I realize that. Don't be like me, make sure you put it in the right spot. Accidentally upgraded to high qual, so I had to take that wall down and upgrade it to go back to again, putting the window instead of a doorway or a single doorway or a G-door just adds a little extra security, protection to the TC. You have the frame plus the window wall, and then I end up putting a high qual window in it. A lot of times people break TCs just trying to get what's in them. Others are trying to grief, but it deters people spending a lot more boom just for the TC. And that same method can be used inside your base also if you've never seen that or done that. Keep that in mind. Excuse the blood splatter. I do end up turning that off here momentarily. I just wasn't realizing I was starving to death over here. I wasn't sure why I was seeing blood splatter on the screen. And you can set up whatever you want in this workspace. I just put mixing tables in there, and sometimes I'll put a fridge. Sometimes I'll just put a box in there. That way, as soon as I get the berries, I can mix them and turn them into teas. And I rarely ever leave much of anything in my hemp farms or berry farms. A lot of people rate them. But the only thing they're going to get out of any one of mine is a lot of lost boom, and they may get a set of, a small set of clones, or you know, some tools. But being that they're often raided, I've learned to not leave much, or much of anything in my berry farms, so that they can waste boom. Here we go. I'm gonna build up to set up my windmill. Windmills need to be, basically, 5 to 6 stories above sea level. You can go as high, take it up as high as you want. The higher you go, up to what I think it's 7 stories, 8 stories, is where it maxes out. Something like that. Will increase your power. You're still gonna have your ups and downs, but the higher up you go. I usually go, 5 stories, 6 stories. For this video, I think I went 5 from the ground up. I think it bottoms out in the, as it fluctuates in the low 80s, and I think I saw like, 130 or so. The 130s when it was peaking, and so regardless, it should be sufficient. But I wouldn't go anything less than about 5 stories from the ground up. So you got the story below, and then I went up 4. You can build your way up, or I put netting up just because it's builder's paradise. It's easy, cheap, and you can ladder up. However you build to put your windmills up. Depending on your stability and whatnot, and how far you go up, you may need to, use all 3 parts of that triangle. Put door frames down on all 3 sides, and you may have to go inside and put a couple door frames down for stability. But I didn't have any issues here going, total of 6 stories. Again, I'm doing this base 100% in sheet metal, and I recommend sheet metal. It's just an expensive cost, to raid. Once it's done, if they try to go through doors, it's going to be what, just to get into the work area, it's going to be, 6 rockets. It'll be 6 plus 2 more doors to get into the planter box area. So, it'll be 12 rockets without a TC. And like I said, unless they raid me at a perfect time when it's, harvest time, they're not going to get much of anything. Here I'm putting the door frames up. Again, regardless of what you build this out of, the door frames need to be metal because they're flat. If it's wood or stone, they're kind of rounded, and the sprinkler heads don't sit properly. They kind of want to lean one way or the other. And the door frames are mandatory to make the 4 sprinkler heads cover all the planter boxes properly. Sometimes you'll get it just perfect where they're watering about identical. Some may be a slightly off, from one another. But, by doing this, you're getting you won't have any problems. So just center them on those door frames between the floor, and like I said, 4 sprinklers will cover it. Again, I use 2 water pumps, 2 purifiers, and I have 1 water pump, 1 purifier feeding 2 sprinklers. Technically, you can do 1 pump or 1 water purifier to handle all 4 sprinklers, but just to avoid any planter boxes from lacking of the water, I go ahead and do 2 pumps, 2 water purifiers. Again, it's only 36 power. So if you're really tight on building mats right now, and or don't have the ability to put up 2 and 2 at the moment, you can get away with starting it with 1 pump, 1 purifier, and 4 sprinkler heads. They take a little longer to get the water level up, but to a growing stage, which the ultimate growing planter box for water runs around 5,000, 5,000, 6,000 water. Yeah, the planter boxes will hold 9. But if you ever watch the percentage on your plants and whatnot, they usually hit that 95 to 100% in the 5,000 range. So typically I let my sprinklers run, fill up to about 4,000 or 5,000, and if I build it and just let it fill up for the night, then it'll be at 9,000, and then they're still at 75%. Tips and tricks is try to keep your water on the upper percent, at least 75% is fine. Closer to 100 you get, the faster they do grow. Having fertilizer in your planter boxes is huge. It will eliminate about 15 minutes off of each grow. And the better your clones are, the faster they will grow also. People talk about the genetics, and a lot of people don't understand. I'll get back to that. But here I'm putting the lights up. Obviously, I need 2 lights per, per area. So 2 up top, 2 below, and I place them right in the middle of the 2, and I center it. Obviously, using the lines and the ceiling tiles. And that way it'll cover both planter boxes, and it actually bleeds out. If you do put 4 planter boxes right in the middle, that the light from all 4 of these lamps, or 8 lamps, I'm sorry, will bleed out and give enough light coverage for the 4 planter boxes in the middle. But back to genetics. The best genes you can get in a clone is 3 G's and 3 Y's. You basically have five options on a gene. You have a G, a Y, a H, an X, and a W. The G is for growing, how fast it grows. No G's means, a berry may take 3 or 4 hours to grow. 3 G's means it'll probably take about an hour and a half or less. Y's is for yield. The more Y's there are, the more the item's going to yield. Most of your berries are going to yield 3 to 5 berries per plant. That's going to be, pretty much maxed out unless you go for find yourself a 4 or 5 Y, clone. It's going to take a long time to grow, but it might give you an extra berry or 2. So, the G and the Y's are the most important. H's is for hardiness. If you live in the snow, if you live in the desert, having an H in there actually does help. So, say you got a 2G, 2Y with 1 or 2 H's. That's actually a good berry for the desert and or the snow. Because the temperature fluctuations, it makes it a little hardier to handle those environment. So the X doesn't affect the plant at all. So if you have a 2G 2Y or a 3G 2Y, whatever with an X, that's actually a really good plant. Is it a God clone? No, but that's having 2 and 2 X's, or you know I wouldn't swat at. If you want to take the time and do the crossbreeding, I can do another video of that in the future on getting crossbreeding plants to get God clones. It does take time, it does take a lot of effort. A lot of times I will, when I say time, it can take a few hours depending on what clones you get from your seeds. Here I'm placing water pumps. I don't recommend placing water pumps this far away from the base, but on the other one they were right up against the building. Here the water wasn't deep enough, so I had to place them out. To make sure, because they have to be in a certain depth of water to be happy. But yeah, I can do a video of for crossbreeding and whatnot. Typically, 99% of the time, unless I get some God clones out of a raid base, I'm gonna use the best genes I've got. And a lot of times it's a 2 or 3G or 2 or 3Y with maybe an X and an H or something like that, or 3 and 2 with an X or an H. Besides hemp, I don't think I've ever gotten a God clone, from a seed. I've gotten them with hemp, and I've gotten them with pumpkins and potatoes. I can tell you a potato God clone gets you about 16 potatoes per plant. It's great for making a fridge full of food, so nobody's starving in your base. But yeah, so as you saw, I put my 2 pumps down. Here's my 2 water purifiers. Still have plenty of room to move. And then I'm gonna come over here, put my battery down, my E-branches. And again, you don't have to put your battery in this wall. This is just one way of doing it, or in this window. Just one way of doing it. I just wanted to show something a little bit different, and the first video showed it in the hallway. And yes, I had problems getting in that window the first time, but that angle, you still have access to all your plugs as needed. And here I'll jump up and plug in the windmill. Like I said, in this one I just went straight from the windmill to the battery. A lot of times I use the splitter just so I can add extra power if need be without too many issues or extra work. If you're liking the build, do me a favor, hit that subscribe and like button. I'd greatly appreciate it. I try to keep my wires pretty clean. I'm not saying they're all perfect, but I typically run them along something. I'll run a lot of them along lines, frames, stuff like that. built our power from our windmill directly to the root combiner. To the battery instead of using the root combiner. I typically use root combiners for a reason. That way I can always add power to it if I need to. If I, increase the size, I can, when I want to run it off one, might need a little extra power. Or if I add an extra, turret or maybe a SAM site, it allows me to add another windmill or a couple of solar panels. But in this case, I just went straight to the battery, being very simplistic. We're going to have to, then we'll put our E branches down, daisy chain those. That'll come in a moment, and run power to the pumps and to the water purifiers and the lights. I recommend using a root combiner, just in case. That way you don't have to rewire a windmill, climb up it, whatever. Here we're going to run the plumbing from the pump to the water purifiers. I attempt to keep all my wiring, plumbing somewhat clean. I try to run lines, on door frames, or keep them in the foundations as I'm doing here with the water lines. Anchor them on the underneath, and then I take it up to the power to the water end, just so they're not all visible sticking out. I know a lot of people don't pay attention to them, but here I was talking about how my pumps were away from the building, and over here they were right on top of them. The water has to be a certain depth. That's one item I would kind of check on. Make sure where you're building. That way you can build your pumps right up against it, if you don't even enclose them. There's several ways to enclose pumps. This is what I'm going to show here is just basically just some eye candy for it per se. It's not necessarily the best route, but show you how it's how it's done. Sometimes once your pumps are down, it's hard to build around them, but so in this case, you build out your foundations, and then you knock out the foundations that you're not going to use, or where you want to place the pumps, and then you build walls and ceiling around them, and that way they're not out in the open, so grubs can't come spear them out, rock them out, whatever, just cause havoc. Most of the time my berry bases are compounded in, and so I'm not overly worried about that. Like I said, this is just get yourself a doorway and some walls, and then you put your ceiling tiles up. But like I said, this was just a quick one over on how to enclose make your pumps not so visible, because they do have to be in certain depths of water. If it's too shallow, it tells you, and you got to move them out. So just make sure your pumps are where you're building, the pumps are going to be in a deep enough spot. I know people, I've seen them where they, add them on to like the end of their buildings and stuff like that. Just showing you can, you can enclose them. So now that these all have, water to them, we need to run the water to the sprinklers. And again, I'm showing you how I run my lines on lines and door frames and whatnot, just to keep them kind of clean. The sprinkler heads have a water in and then a pass through, so you can daisy chain them. You can daisy chain as many as you want. You know, in this case, I'm doing 2 per water purifier, 2 per pump, just to make sure everything gets sufficient water, not only when it's filling up, but while it's growing. Because if your water output's too low as they grow, they'll actually absorb up a lot of the water if you're not paying attention. And you know, I'd rather it, you know, stay full, which isn't the most optimal. For most of your plants, optimal water level is right around 5,000 or so, and in a full planter box is 9,000. But you know, keeping your plants at 75%, which is, you know, full 9,000, it really isn't going to affect much. Another trick, you know, to help speed up, you know, growing is fertilizer. Fertilizer is made by getting horses, collecting their manure, and putting them in a composter. You get 10 fertilizer for every manure, and you know, putting them inside your planter boxes will make the dirt 100%. It will actually cut off about 15 minutes per grow. Here I'm doing the E branches. Each of the pumps and the purifiers take 5 power, I believe, and so I'm setting them all to 5. The lights take 2 power apiece. So with that being said, we're going to be using, you know, 20 for the E branches and 16 for the, or 20 for the 2 pumps and 2 water purifiers, and 16 for the 8 lights. At the moment, I don't think I hooked in the battery to the first E branch yet, so I'm going to go in and do that, and then that pump will turn on, and then as I plug everything in, it'll turn on. That way you know when you plug it in that it's actually working properly, instead of having to go back and forth and check. So as you come out here, you hear the one pump running. And now we're going to plug in the other pump, and you'll hear it click on. And now we're going to run inside, and we'll check the black barrels, which is the salt water. And you'll see that there's salt water in there. If you look at the little picture, you can tell the difference between salt water and purified water. Salt water has little specks in it, and the purified water will be, you know, just clear, which is in the blue barrel of the purifier. And we go in, and the sprinklers on the left should kick on. There we go. And then we will hook up the next purifier. And the right side will then start sprinkling water. And there we go. So all 4 sprinklers are spraying water, and yes, the water is watering all 8. Those 4 sprinklers are watering all 8 planter boxes. And just like the sprinklers, the lights have a pass-through, so you plug it into the power in, which will light up for you, and then the pass-through lights up, and then you pass through it. Doing power in, pass through. And then I get down here and I gotta build my jump up so I can reach the, forget about it. Gotta build my jump ups here so I can reach all four of the lights up top. Because of their location, even though you can place them, the electrical is slightly out of reach for the power in and pass throughs. And you can do this in any order you want as far as the water or electricity or whatever. I just did it this way on this install. Now we're in, pass through, and at this point you have a fully working hemp farm or dairy farm. You have all the lights you need, all the water you need, and if you want, you can go ahead and place, if you want to do 20 planter boxes on this floor, you can place 4 more in the middle, and the sprinklers will water them along with the other 16, and the light should bleed over, get enough bleed over from each of those lamps to give you light on the middle ones. As you can see, all of them are getting water. They're all getting it pretty somewhat evenly. Some of the middle ones are getting a little less, but overall it's going to be right in line. As you come in here and check these after they've been down for a little while, the middle ones. And see all of that. So that is the build out there of that berry base. Again, we got 16 planter boxes. 1 or 2 water pumps, 2 water purifiers, 4 sprinklers, 8 lights, 1 large battery, 1 windmill, and 5 E-branches. You can add some more E-branches if you want to add turrets or whatnot. And what I'm looking at here is there's a trick to plant into the top boxes because it's really hard to reach all the spots. But if in your hotbar, if you have your clones highlighted and you take 1 clone into one of these boxes and you light up 1 spot and then hit your LT, left trigger, and hold it, it will highlight all the spots in the planter box. And then you right RT, right trigger, and it will plant all 9 at once rather than having to do 1 at a time. So that makes it easy to plant even on those the second shelf. So yeah, the upkeep is just under 3,200, plus a couple high qual for the windows, and there it is. Totally completed. Berry farm or hemp farm. We are ready to start growing. Again, 16 planter boxes. We're going to create you like 144 berries or hemp plants at a time. And 20 will do 180. So if you want to be a berry vendor or a hemp vendor, you know, depending on how big you want to go, one floor should be sufficient, but the second and third floor. Think of a floor for every like 3 people in your team. So, you know, if you got 4 or 5 people in your team, you might want to go to a second story. You know, but it's not, I mean, you just see how much you're using. And everything is groovy from there. You know, if you appreciate you watching the video. If you liked it, click that like button, subscribe, follow, hit that bell, get notified when I release other videos. I also do lives. Most of my lives are on Twitch, but I do them on YouTube sometimes, and I also take my lives from Twitch and import them into YouTube. So, if you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I will come in and do my best to answer them all, and I appreciate y'all watching. Finish out the quick look around here, and we're good to go. Y'all be good now.